I already know that I'm not gonna like what Grapplr has to say in this video, but I'm gonna watch it anyway. And now, first things before we do anything, if you go hate Grapplr, if you go drop hate on Grapplr as a person, I'm going to ban you from my stream. I'll find out who you are and I'll ban you. Yeah, no, if you take enough hormone blockers, it like doesn't actually matter. I'm doing good. And then what is this? There's an NCAA transgender athlete. NCAA transgender swimmer. I want to know what this person's talking about. Leah Thomas win a Division I championship. That's kind of hype. Oh God. Oh, so oh God, Caitlyn Jenner. Why can't Caitlyn Jenner? Why did you transition and then still hate yourself? I don't get it. I don't fucking understand. Teed off on Penn swimmer Leah Thomas, who became the first transgender athlete in any sport to win an NCAA Division championship last week. The former Olympic decathlete 72 said Thomas isn't the rightful winner of the NCAA 500 women's freestyle swimming champion. I'm not it's not transphobic or anti-trans, it's common sense. Thomas, a senior student athlete, competed on the men's swim team for 3 seasons after completing so they completed 2 years of hormone replacement therapy. Thomas competed on the women's team for the 2021-2022 season in a dominant fashion. Her success has sparked a fierce debate over whether transgender athletes have an unfair advantage. Okay. Oh my God. So let's just, oh my God. Athletic performance. Oh, here we go. Dun dun dun. Examine the effects. This is actually interesting. This is a study. This is an interesting study. We finished results a record of 29 trans men and 46 trans women who started gender-affirming hormone while in the United States Air Force. When compared to pre- and post-hormone fitness test results of the trans women and trans men with average performance and all women and men under the age of 30 in the Air Force between 2004 and 2014. We also measured rate of, prior to gender-affirming hormones, trans women performed 31% more push-ups. Participants were, okay, so this is important. Prior to gender-affirming hormones, transgender women performed 31% more push-ups. Thank you for the follow. And 50% more sit-ups in 1 minute and ran 1.5 miles, which was 21% faster than their female counterparts. After 2 years of feminizing hormones, the push-up and sit-up difference disappeared, but the trans women were still 12% faster. Prior to gender-affirming hormones, trans men performed 43% fewer push-ups and ran 1.5 miles than their male counterparts. After 1 year of taking masculinizing hormones, there was no longer a difference in push-ups or run times, and the number of sit-ups performed in 1 minute by trans men exceeded the average performance of their male counterparts. Summary: the 15 to 31% athletic advantage that trans women displayed over their female counterparts prior to starting gender-affirming hormones declined with feminizing therapy. However, trans women saw a 99% faster mean run speed after the 1 year period of testosterone suppression than is recommended by the World Athletics for inclusion in women's events. So it's not a gigantic difference, right? Because this... Yeah, so it's clearly not a huge difference, and the study says so. It says that this looks like it states that there was a difference in endurance at most after 1 year. This is only 1 year, and this person underwent 2 years. This isn't even super duper accurate, but based on the results, we could conclude in a 2-year situation that this difference would decline drastically, right? Because that's what they require. That's what the athletic organizations require, and they are all about, okay? Like, the athletic organizations are not pro-trans. If you think the athletic organizations are pro-trans, you're smoking crack cocaine, all right? They are not. They do not want this type of environment. And if you don't believe me, there's an African runner who was not transgender. She was just a woman whose body naturally produced more testosterone, and she could not run with women in the Olympics because her body naturally produced more testosterone, which is the other thing, is that all this is fucking bullshit anyway, because at the end of the day, every person's body is different, and there are women that can produce more testosterone than other women in general. There's all sorts of genetic differences that are already there, and so they account for those. You wouldn't be able to compete if there was an advantage. And if there was such a massive advantage, don't you think that more males who were subpar in their fields would transition? The number of transgender athletes is like abysmal. It's very low. Okay, cool. That's all I wanted to know. That's all I wanted to know before we continue on.
And then the question...
It's insane. It's so fucking insane.
Really hot take question. I think the big question is, should
so
they
there
be
is
allowed to compete
like
or not?
no advantage.
Are you asking, do I think they have an advantage? I would say definitely. Are you asking, should they compete? That's a much more nuanced answer. But like, it's really easy to realize.
Oh God, Rolly. No, Rolly.
How? What if Michael Phelps transitioned in swimming? 2 years down the line, no female athlete will be able to beat him. Or her in that case.
Rolly, don't be unbased.
What if LeBron
and the Olympic Committee banned that runner from 2 races, not from all women's sports. Exactly.
And 2 years down the line,
it's insane. It's insane.
The greatest female basketball player of all time. At the end of the day, like, these are very easy things to look at and realize to be fact. What if Novak Djokovic transitioned?
Okay, anyway, just
the Williams sisters would never be able to touch him or her in that case. 2 years down the line. So
we already saw the science. I don't need to keep pausing.
You take a hyper elite male athlete, and then they transition and compete in female sports. There's zero question that they would ever be beaten. There's just no way to beat them. So yeah, even if they were to lose some muscle mass and whatnot from the female transitioning, it wouldn't matter. So that out of the way, I mean, we can just look at it and realize that the hyper elite male athletes competing in female categories would always win, even with hormone therapy. That said, what do I think about them? Should they be allowed to compete? I think this is a question of this is a really difficult question to answer, because it shouldn't
be difficult. The answer is yes. Like, the answer is yes. They already have the things in place. I'm pretty sure the requirement is 2 years of hormone therapy, and that's like the standard. But let's just double check. NCAA transgender requirements. I believe it is 2 years of hormone therapy. There we go. This is as of the 2022 to 2023 season. Hype. Good to know. Esport determined by policy. Yeah. What does this say? Like the Olympics, updated college transgender position policy for the national governing body of that sport. Okay, cool. If there is no policy, the sports, we need to document sport-specific testosterone levels beginning 4 weeks before the championship selections. So you can't even compete if your testosterone levels are too high. That's like what it says. They will also document testosterone levels for 4 weeks before the championship selections. Full implementation will begin. So this is going to start not this year, but next year. However, with the 2022 to 2023 academic year, they will need document levels at the beginning of their season and a second documentation 6 months after the first. And then, yeah, that's what that says. I don't understand it. I think this is going to become the standards, what this is saying, but it's, as far as what I'm reading, it says that in starting like with this year, what spawned this discussion is that they have to have appropriate levels of testosterone. So already just wrong. We're wrong. Many people who are like, it's just wrong to say that that's
many factors.
That's an advantage.
It's such a nuanced question that it's not an easy.
It's not nuanced.
My personal
transgender women are women.
Let me see if I can. I gotta articulate this well.
Also, people leave out that the NCAA athlete was in the top 10 in men's transition and only dropped in ranking in the men's division after starting estrogen. Again, I know too much about this because some Irish runner wrote an article. Hey, listen, that's also good to know though. Like, they were in the top 10 in the men's pre-transition and only dropped in ranking in the men's division after starting estrogen. So already their performance is declining to the. So that's the whole argument, is that their performance is too good. But like, if they're on estrogen, the performance declines.
Should force organizations in a yes or a no. I don't think the government should be able to say transgender females cannot compete. I don't think the government should be able to say transgender females can compete. I think it should entirely just come down to the person who's organizing the event to say these are the rules of the event, and you follow them, basically, because it is the organizer who sets up the categories. Such an American answer. Well, that's what I believe. I'm not trying to be politically correct or anything. I do believe this.
No, but you're just being incorrect. That's the problem.
And I want to open up a Legends of Runeterra Championship.
I'll say this. He did open by saying this is just an opinion, right? Like, Grapplr's not claiming to be an expert on the subject. However, when you have a certain amount of influence, when people ask you a question, if you are not qualified to answer the question, you should at least then do the research before you answer the question. Okay? Or say, I don't know enough about that subject to answer the question. Because clearly, based on already 2 minutes in, Grapplr does not know enough about this to actually provide a real valuable answer or to form an informed opinion on a hot button issue, right? On a hot button issue and topic, let alone make a 19-minute video about it, right? Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. All I did was look up the situation and say, oh, well, how does this work? Okay, well, what are the standards in place, right? Like, what was in place? Just ask questions. Just ask questions. That's a whole part of education, asking questions.
I believe I should be allowed to make whatever rules I want for categories, whether the public likes it or not. These are my categories. They are my categories. So it's so unfair for female born though. Well, to be fair, so is female. Like, for example, the rules for basketball are unfair to me, who wasn't born 6'7", and I don't have a 40-inch vertical jump. Those are unfair to me. Why isn't there a category catering to the fact that a category specifically for people who have an under 30-inch vertical leap and who are under 6'4"? You know, I want a different league. You know, it's unfair. I was born this way. Like, sports inherently are unfair.
Based take. I'm not gonna lie. Based take. This is correct. They are. This is there are just general natural differences between you and I and every person on the planet. I know women that are way stronger than me.
They're inherently unfair. They are. That said,
don't just let it at that, bro.
Elite male athletes who transition, it's unfair for even elite female athletes. It is. It simply is. It is unfair. I agree. It is unfair. But sports are inherently unfair. So I don't think the unfair is a very good argument because they are already unfair. I don't think it's a good argument. I don't think you should even argue whether it's fair or not.
Like half-based.
In general.
Still
so
holding on to
like
the transphobia, but like half-based.
Sports are and always will be unfair due to genetic differences. Unless everybody has the exact same genetics, they'll always be unfair. But is it unfair for an elite male athlete to transition? Is it unfair for the female athletes? Yes. But that's not an argument because they're unfair either way. So I don't like looking at it from that point of view because I don't think you really get any useful information out of it.
I do want to also add real quick. I'm gonna pull another Hassan moment here. I feel like a lot of the anti-trans rhetoric comes from the fact that when you say like transgender male or woman to someone, they instantly just like the mind of a person thinks of like a dude in a dress, right? Like a man wearing a dress. They don't think of a person who has transitioned and done like the medical procedures and taken hormones, and they don't think about that. They think of a dude with like a wig and a dress, right? They think of like the stuff from like white chicks is what the default I feel like Norman brain jumps to when it comes to when you say the word transgender. And so when you say transgender athlete, they're thinking about a like LeBron James in a wig playing basketball with a bunch of women, not LeBron James who has chemically altered the way that his body works to function like a woman's body. So that's one of the big things I think a lot of people don't realize is that the Norman brain is very informed because transgender issues are very new to a lot of people, and there's been a lot of progress. But in general, like when you say transgender athlete, usually the default position is like, no, that isn't. Why would you do that? That's having a dude perform with females in sports, because the Norman brain has not yet adjusted its thought process to fit in the idea that, you know, transgender women are women. It's not they're not men. They're a woman. They were born in a man's body, but they have the brain and the desire to be a woman. So that's the big thing that I think there's a little bit of a missed gap on that. I'd say is I think how I'd explain that.
But I do think it should be entirely down to the organization. That's what I believe, because at the end of the day, that is their event. They're the ones who are setting it up, and they should be able to make the rules. Is it unfair? I'm not allowed. I would love to compete in boxing in the featherweight division. It's not fair that they're, like divisions exist for a reason.
His half stakes are probably come from articles Joe Rogan has mentioned. I don't think that's the case. I don't know how politically active Grapplr is, right? Or how much like I don't want to assume Grapplr watches Joe Rogan. And as much as Joe Rogan's a fucking dumbass, like not all of Joe Rogan's content sucks, you know? People who sim for Joe Rogan are like cringe, but there are some older Joe Rogan episodes that are pretty good. And sometimes like when he's doing non-political shit, Joe Rogan's like a pretty entertaining podcaster. It's just that his political takes are fucking hot garbage. And he has been like converted to be a right-wing fucking conspiracy theorist. So it's hard to have him not talk politics when he fucking shouldn't. but yeah, you also have to realize that, like, you know, if he's a big martial arts guy, like, it's also, it's different. It's a different headspace is the thing. Like I said earlier, it's a different headspace.
Fine.
If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
If you want to make an event based on whatever you want, I'm fine with it, generally speaking. One thing I've always wanted to see is a steroid Olympics. A lot of athletes are already roided out of their minds. It's not really good to use Riot Games game as an example, since Riot are notorious among esports team for being practically dictators that crowd out competitive organizers, blacklisting journalists, and commonly figures force everyone to play by the rules. You have zero chance of setting up your own lore tournament if that's not an official Riot thing. It was just an example. I understand what you're saying.
This guy's cringe. I'm sorry, that guy's super cringe. Bro, that dude is so cringe.
Advantage,
what does that do with anything?
Striking sport, just because you have less southpaw partners to practice with, and they generally practice mostly versus orthodox stance. I think it is an advantage in any striking martial art.
Okay, so like, I just don't read chat. Don't read chat. Don't read chat. Don't read his chat. Don't read his fucking chat.
If you allow males and females to play in the same
he's addressing
environment, will only be male. That's not necessarily true, because the amount of males transitioning to female is still a small amount. They're not going to necessarily dominate until a much later future, but I can see it being more and more.
Okay, but like, they're not going to dominate ever is the thing, right? Because it's so transgender is not a choice. We need to establish that as well. That being transgender is not a choice. You are born, right, different. You're born and your brain works differently from other people. It's not a decision that you make, okay? Because again, the great example is this. If you, like, human beings take the path of least resistance through life, why would you choose to take a path that is fucking harder, that makes your life suck? Like, why would you choose that path? You know, why would you take the path that's like, hey, I'm gonna go and get bullied and shit on every day for like trying to exist? You don't do that. It's not a thing, right? Like, no one makes the decision to be trans. Like, no one makes the decision to be gay. It's not a choice that you make. So that whole idea of like, the men will dominate the sport. Like, it's the reason why the number is so low and it will never get bigger is because transgender women are a small minority of the population. All right, that's like let's accept that. Okay, let's just get that out of the way too. All right, cool, we're good. On to the video.
The more
I hope I explained that well. Sure. I have ADHD, so I'm not the fucking best at that. Well, explanation of my thoughts.
Male athletes. No, but like, I don't think females transitioning to males can really compete with males.
It's also not true. We already saw the study that the testosterone, those on hormones, after 1 year, we're actually we're stronger we're doing more sit-ups than their male counterparts in the military. It's crazy.
I just don't see it happening.
It's also hype as fuck.
It would really depend how much testosterone they would be allowed to use, because most sports don't allow you to use testosterone whatsoever, and female to male transitioning have to use testosterone, so it would depend how much they could have used that loophole and whether they could really like get roided enough to really catch up and really have an advantage. It would really depend. I mean, you can look at some female bodybuilders who are absolutely hyper gigantic in terms of musculature, who are much more muscular than I could ever be naturally. There are no transitions because of sports achievement. You can't be 7 feet, but you can always transition. What do you mean? But yeah, that's basically where my stance is. Any deeper than that, I'd have to give it a good thought. But so
I mean, you can't be 7 feet, you can always transition. That's not.
Here's where I think the fundamental.
That's not how that works. God, chatters are dumb.
I don't really have an answer for this part, but this is the fundamental biggest difference. Why this is even a debated topic. I really don't believe that there are a lot of people who believe that there is no inherent advantage for male to female athletes versus normal female athletes. Even those who argue that there's no really big advantage, they probably realize there is.
Oh, but there's not, because science says so. God damn, science said no.
Win the argument. They want male to females to be allowed to compete. I think the real question comes down to the following. And let me see how to phrase this properly. Generally speaking,
again, it's like, Glory, you gotta I don't think any people are bad people at all. You should definitely be like, damn, bad take for sure. I don't think Rolly's a bad person, and I feel like if Rolly I don't know what Rowley's understanding of the situation is. Okay, I don't know what it is, but it's probably the Norman understanding, which is what we talked about earlier, that same Norman viewpoint. So I don't think it's something that you should be worried about. It's something you have to like educate people on, because also like I didn't know a lot of transgender people until I went to college, and even then I didn't know very many transgender people. And the few people that I did meet that were like transgender or gender fluid or just in the LGBTQ community, meeting those people and being exposed to those people helps you realize what they're like, you know? So like that was a very important thing for me, and because of the general culture around being transgender or LGBTQ, which is the LGBTQ one has definitely died down quite a bit. But by that, I'm sorry, I should specify more. Being like gay, lesbian, bisexual, like that the bigotry around for them, the acceptance of those types of individuals, right, way higher now than it was before. And so therefore you're exposed to more people that are in that community, and so you're like, oh, like they're just normal people, right? It's not like you get to you have to actually get to experience what they're like to understand this argument. So whenever I met transgender women, I realized like, oh, these are just women. Like they may have a pecker, right? They have a little ding dong, but they act. And this is all based on societal norms, but right, they act, they strive to be, they're going through medical procedures to alter their bodies. Like I don't know if it's permanent. I don't know if it's permanent, but they are altering their genetic the chemistry of their body, so that way they are how they feel, like they are the way they feel they should be. And that's the big like disconnect I think most Norman people have, as opposed to most people I would say have met transgender people, or have at least like done like 5 minutes of Google research.
But generally speaking, the transgender movement is about treating people who transition as the gender they assign themselves. That's generally speaking what society is trying to move towards. Treating male to females just the way you would treat females. That's the general approach. So the stronger you believe in that, the more likely it is that you believe they should be allowed to compete in female sports, because otherwise you're treating them like males, which you don't want to do. I think that's fundamentally where this comes down, and why most people who argue that they should be allowed in female sports.
I don't like that Grapplr's not taking a stance here.
I think that's the crux of it. That's my impression.
I understand. I don't like it. I don't like it.
People who want them to be treated like the gender they assign themselves.
I don't want to say it's dog whistling, but it's definitely not doing any favors. Okay, chat. I don't like that. I don't like that he's doing the song and dance.
To apply that to everything. For example, they don't want them to go to female prisons. They don't want them, etc., etc. And one of those things is they don't want them to compete in female sports at the most elite level. So those two groups have a fundamental difference in how they think the transgender issue should be treated. One wants them to have absolute, I'm a female treated in every way as a female. The other group says, generally speaking, treat them like females, but there have to be exceptions. And those two groups disagree on some fundamental issues. Now,
hey, fuck this chatter. Fuck this chatter. God,
I don't know.
Chat's dumb. Just remember, chatters are dumb. Chatters are dumb. Absolute chatters are sick. These chatters are dumb.
Shouldn't be my opinion.
There's always dumb chatters.
Whether they should compete or not.
We're cool.
I think it should be the organizer's opinion. And if, let's say, an organizer says, well, we're not going to allow male to females to compete with females, that's fine. And somebody can make their own organization that does allow it.
Honestly, though, maybe he's on the right. Well, maybe I'm assuming the wrong things about Wamu. Okay. Right? Maybe Wamu's saying that like this is how life should be. And if so, absolutely. I think gender's dumb. It doesn't fucking matter. Gender is the most irrelevant fucking thing in the world, dude. Like, it's so stupid that people are so wrapped up in gender. The only, like, number one, if you just, historically, it's fucking bullshit, because every culture has the different ways they treat the different genders, right? Like, American English, like the English language doesn't have an actual gendered pronoun for someone who does not align male or female, but I think it's is it Aztecs? It's a South American country. It might be Mexico, or like a Middle American country or a South American country that has one in their language, a term, and I forgot what it's called, but I was in my my race, class, and gender sociology course that I took last semester, where they have a term for people who don't align male or female. Like, there's a third pronoun for those individuals. And like, so like it's only weird to us, apparently. Like it's only really a weird thing for people in Western, like, I don't even want to, but like Western Abrahamic countries that base their moral values off of Abrahamic religions. It's a weird thing for us.
People will watch it and it'll make money. The thing is that fundamentally they aren't 100% women, so it should be fine to have exceptions. Well, see, that's a fundamental question as well. Some people will say that male to female transgenders are 100% women.
Yeah, they don't. Woman, most likely, yeah. I mean, there's languages like, which is funny that if it's like Mexico, because I know Spanish is like a very gendered language, but there are people that don't even have gendered third person pronouns.
As in gender, they'll say they are 100% women. Now, if we're talking about sex, no.
Yeah, there is a difference, right? But woman and man are terms that refer to your sex, your natural born sex. Gender is boy, girl, male, female. That's gender. Those are two different things. And people need to understand that they're not the same, because sex is like a science. It's a scientific thing. And it's based on the organs that you have. And sex is a term specifically used for your role in the reproductive process. You are either the like, right? And there are animals that switch their sex or are intersex that can do both parts. And so they are not considered male or female to species. Boy, girl, like, you know, it's hard to not use them interchangeably. If you, again, I grew up in America, so it's hard not to use them interchangeably, but they are two different things. And that's a big deal.
If we say gender, some people say yes, they are. Now, to be 100% woman doesn't mean you're exactly the same as most women. But the category woman, a lot of people will put them in there and say they are 100% woman, if that's how you define woman via gender. And that's not necessarily wrong either. That can be correct depending on how you define woman. If you define woman as somebody who identifies as being a woman, they are 100% woman. That's okay.
I can't tell. I can't tell what these takes are. It's just like this is around the bush, through the bend. Let's not exclude any views.
Organizers should have the freedom.
Let's not exclude any individuals. And I don't fuck with that, bro.
They should be allowed to do that.
Because like, if you got chud views, I don't want to talk to you.
Of saying you as a sports organizer have to allow them to compete, or you as a sports organizer are not allowed to let them compete. No, I don't think the government should have any say whatsoever. Because an organization should be allowed to do the following. I should be allowed to say, our categories are separated by sex. If you're separating categories by sex, at that point, it's very easy to say, well, male to female can't compete. If you say we're separating our categories by gender, then under most definitions, they should be allowed to compete. But it should be down to the organizer how they separate their categories. Does that make sense? That's what's most logical.
Yeah, I feel like Grapplr is like, his opinion, yeah, it's very Norman. It's a very Norman stance, right? Where Grapplr is very much like wants to be pro-trans and is expressing some level of pro-trans idea, like gender and sex are different, and that if we're talking about gender, then yes, they should be able to compete. Like that sort of difference, just a misunderstanding of the actual process of transitioning, which it's hard to have an understanding. Like there's so much shit in the world to know that certain things are, people just aren't going to know about them, right? Like you kind of have to seek out that information. And it sucks that the information you don't seek out usually is the shit that's like hateful and bigoted, because you'll just get that fucking fed to you by existing. Because people that have hateful, bigoted ideas love to fucking bring them up at all times. I don't know why. I don't know why they fucking derail conversations, but they do. Okay? People that believe ideologies that are of like anti things will just bring that shit up. Okay, I do it too. I shouldn't even fucking argue. I bring up anti-Republican shit all the time. That's because I think that leftists and ideas that are pro these groups and communities, right, like ideas that are backed up by facts and knowledge, should be brought up more and expressed.
That's where I stand. That's as logical of a conclusion I could come up with on this. I still think companies should have a limit, though. Like, imagine separating by race. Well, the problem with separating by race is a cultural one. I could see a world that had zero racism at all, separating by race, as long as it wasn't for racist reasons. When it comes to racism, in my opinion...
Okay, hold on. Let's get this out of the way. Race and nationality, not the same thing. Race is a made-up concept. Race was made in America, by the way. If you didn't know, if you look up Bacon's Rebellion, it's a historical incident where originally you had like Africans and Irish people, Irishmen, and basically like what you define as white and blacks and other people of color, all were in like under indentured servitude and treated like garbage. And this dude, I forgot his first name, his last name was Bacon, and he rallied everyone together, and they had a little revolt against the ruling class, the owners, the people that owned them and made them work. They revolted. And so the government of the United States of America, like the people that, well, I shouldn't say the government, but the motherfuckers that were running the show, which were the rich dudes, which also happened to be in government, instituted laws that said, okay, well, you cannot whip or mistreat indentured servants that are white and Christian. Like your workers that are white and Christian, can't treat them like shit, but everyone else you can. And these like racist ideas then kind of spread, right? Because America, our main export is culture, right? People don't seem to realize that American culture is a massive export. So we influence a lot of opinions on things and concepts. And also so racism as a whole dates back a lot to us and also the British, but we're kind of the British. So us, we fucked that shit up. British were enslaving a lot of people. It wasn't just Africans. Eventually, it became just Africans. When they weren't doing slavery anymore, then they had like fucking territories in other countries, and they were influencing African cultures based on religious belief. It's great. Religion was fucking stupid. Let me just get that out of there too. I don't like Christianity as an idea and a concept, and Catholicism and that like religious sect of people. I don't like it because historically it has been used as a means of oppressing other people and attempting to like claim power over someone innately, and like I am better than you. But yeah, and then there's all these other historical examples in American culture of like race being fucking bullshit. Like there was a Japanese immigrant in back, it was before this, I think it was the 1920s. I don't remember the exact time period, but it was before the civil rights movement, like long before then, when people of color, if you weren't white, you essentially could not own property, and you were not allowed to become a citizen, right? So you weren't allowed to become an American citizen if you were not white, like an official naturalized citizen. So you lost a bunch of privileges. You could live here and be an immigrant, but you weren't a citizen. So what this Japanese guy went and said to the Supreme Court and said, hey, I may be Japanese, but I work just as hard and I love this country and I embrace the same ideas as the white man. Can I be a naturalized citizen? Can we be naturalized? Can I be white? It was the thing. And then the court said, no, you can't, because scientifically the genetic makeup of Japanese people is not similar enough to the genetic makeup of the white man, the white European man, to be considered white. So no. Okay. And so then a few years later, an Indian dude said, hey, I have evidence, scientific proof that the genetic makeup of the Indian man is similar to the genetic makeup of the white man. Similar enough, right? It's within the boundaries that you described for the Japanese dude's court case. Can I be white? And they said, no, because you don't look white. Science doesn't matter. It's all, race is fucking made up bullshit. So do not buy into the idea of race. Nationality is completely different than race. Okay? Race is fake.
I don't consider things racist unless the intent is racist. For example,
that's a bad take, because you don't have to try to be racist
without any racist means. Like he said, yesterday I was reading the book and the word N-word appeared, and he just said the N-word in that context. And
no, I agree. That's not racist. That's not racist. I don't
see that as a racist thing.
That's not a racist thing. That's discussing a literature, a piece of literature. Like that's I completely agree. That's not racist. Now, I still think you should kind of censor it anyway, just because it's also just an uncomfortable fucking word in a lot of situations. Okay? And I grew up in the Xbox Live chats. I've fucking heard it. I've said it. Okay? I've heard other people say it. And you kind of get desensitized to it until you learn about it and you realize, oh shit, that's like not okay. It's not a good word to use. And so we shouldn't use it. Right? Like there are contexts in which you can say the N-word, for sure. 100%.
Said, due to cultural reasons, he probably shouldn't say that. But that doesn't make
There's also other countries and other languages that have an N-word that does not mean black. Have you guys seen hold on, let me see if I can find the video. I want to find it. Because it's really fucking funny. Tyler One reacts to Chinese song. Oh, I can't find the fucking video. There's a song in China that has the N-word in it. Or it's not Chinese. I think it's Korean. I think it's a Korean song. My apologies. That was a little insensitive. But it's a Korean song, and I believe they have a word that sounds a lot like the N-word, but it does not mean the same thing. So there is that, like.
But because of the culture we live
there
in,
are
some
cultural differences,
even outside of racist context.
In terms of like your language.
So if we lived in a world where nobody was racist, I'd generally speaking be fine if they had some organizations separating athletes by race for whatever reason they wanted to. But the problem is, due to the context of our current civilization and the fact that there is a lot of racism, that's why it's probably not fine. Does that make sense? A lot of things are not necessarily
what up, Dave?
racist.
What do you mean? Oh, you can barely hear it? Fuck, I'm sorry.
The world is so racist, we don't do them either way because they could be racist. And they could be interpreted racist, and they could make racist people more outspoken about it. And like, there's a lot of problems that come down the line. Even if the intent wasn't racist, it could have bad results. So let's ask this question. What is the purpose of separating categories? What is the purpose of that? Why do we have weight categories?
Oh God, I hate chatters. Oh, I fucking hate chatters, dude.
Why do those exist? The only reason categories exist, it's not to let everyone compete. 99% of all people on the world cannot be a top level athlete in like very popular sports. If you have a kid, the odds of him being an NBA star are less than 1%, no matter how hard he tries. No matter how hard he tries, he has very low odds of being in the NBA. It's as simple as that. And that's true for most very popular sports. Sports are unfair. It's not an include all, everyone can be a hyper athlete. No, they can't. It's just impossible. So why do we have categories in sports? It's not to let more people, yes, the more categories you have, the more chances different people have of competing. But it's more about the
I'll make an
spectator's
assumption
point of
on
view.
this.
People want to see people.
No, so I don't agree with that. I have an assumption. I'm not sure, Dave. It's pretty loud on my end. My OBS levels are showing it as being fairly high. I'm not sure. You may have to just turn your audio up. I'm not positive. It could just be a thing with how it's streaming to Twitch. But I'll have to rewatch the actual recording when I'm done. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. The reason, so categories are like a retroactive thing, right? Like we used to exclude women from sports, right? And then they wanted to play sports, and so rather than including them in sports, we made another category. Now there are genetic differences between men and female in terms of performance. That is a real thing. It is not to say that women can't compete with men, because they do. And it's not to say women can't outperform men, because there are women that outperform me in athletics. There are women that can outperform you. There are also women I outperform. Genetics and your makeup and your chemical balance are different. They're unique. But testosterone does lead to the building of more muscle mass, right? So there is that innate difference. And the only real sports where I think it matters truly is like contact sports, right? Where you're fighting someone and things like that. Because these are people that are training constantly to be in the peak form that their body can be. And for a majority of people, a man is going to be stronger than a woman. That is how it is. It's not 100% of the time, but in general, you will be, because your body produces more testosterone. It naturally produces more testosterone, right? Not all the time, but for the most part. So that is there's like a safety element to it, but really I feel like a lot of it is retroactive. We created categories and found this information out because we originally were excluding other individuals from groups.
Shine in different areas. Heavyweight boxer, watching him box at that.
Culture, for example, a lot of people in Asia would treat 90 people like they came from their planet. They're technically not intentionally racist, but it's not intentionally racist, but it's not particularly meant to be harmful. Oh boy, stop reading chat. Stop reading chat. Stop reading chat.
It's a very different experience from watching a lightweight boxer box at that level. You watch somebody like Tyson Fury and you watch somebody like Pacquiao. They're two entirely different sports almost, the way it goes. Why? Because they're so different in terms of what kind of person can make it to the elite level. due to those categories.
Yeah, that's true. Like those types of
That
categories where you
can-
break down
can
based on
enjoy both
size and
aspects
such
of
are
it.
designed to create
Same thing, for
a
example,
more fair competition.
in, let's say, I mean, that's true for almost all sports in weight categories per se. And I think the same is for sex categories. If you only had all-inclusive tennis, males and females compete with each other, you would never be able to see what women are able to achieve in tennis. You would never see it. Because the Williams sisters would never make it to the top. Like, they would be all the way at the bottom. So,
Okay, so
wanna see
here's
what
the thing
women
though,
look
right?
like
Is
at
that couldn't we also then say that, like, in that situation, couldn't the weight requirements for women to compete with men in boxing just be different? Like, couldn't heavier women compete in just lower boxing weight classes and to create a more even genetic matchup? Like, wouldn't that be a thing? Like, if you think a little bit harder about it, not saying that someone is wrong for not doing that, I'm not being an ass, but if you just think a fucking little bit harder, okay, about what you just said and really internalize it, like, oh, we divide it by weight to make it so that way it's more fair, then couldn't you do the same thing? Like, maybe Serena Williams can't beat X super fucking extreme genetic perfection tennis player who has X amount of testosterone, but you could find, I guarantee you can find a really good male tennis player that has a similar physical capacity to Serena Williams and have them play, and it would be perfectly balanced. I guarantee you could do it. All right, I promise, because each person's genetics are different.
People are curious. People want to watch it,
and it's honestly, it's really has less to do with your sex than you think, because there are women who have XY chromosomes. Like, there are women that are XY because genetics are fucking insane and weird and don't make sense.
That's a beautiful thing. So categories exist mostly for the spectator, just to see what can be achieved at the elite level. That's my opinion. So when you talk about, like, should we include transgenders? I would say it depends on the sport, but at the end of the day, it should come down to the organizer's vision of what they're actually trying to achieve with their categories. How take women's sports were created because women wanted a place to showcase their talents. And I think people want to see women showcase their talents. For sure. I don't disagree. I don't think that's a hot take. I mean, people want to see women at the highest level.
I should also, okay, hold on. This is actually really funny. I have an anecdote. So I, like Grapplr, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for, for about 3 years. 3 years, I believe. I was 2 or 3. One of the numbers. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But, and when I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was, as a man, and I would go in and I would get my ass whooped by women half my size that were way stronger than me, right? Even after I started, like, working on getting into shape, there were still women that would beat my ass, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a technique-based sport designed around taking down competitors that are bigger than you. There were also, however, men in my class that were stronger than those women, okay? And there were women that were stronger than some of those dudes. Now, at the top level, in a one-to-one match, usually what would happen is you'd see dudes that were super ripped and big, bulky dudes would destroy women in the class. But there were men that were at a higher belt level than myself, around the same belt level as women, so I think it was purple belt, that would have even fights against those women. Right? Make sense? Cool. Hope that made sense.
Female sports have probably less viewership than male sports in general, but that doesn't mean they don't have viewership. For example, Ronda Rousey. I loved watching Ronda Rousey
badass.
fight. When Ronda Rousey first came into the MMA circuit, she was one of my favorite people to watch. Why? Because she was so exciting to watch.
Ronda's fucking talented.
Female
as shit,
categories
dude.
in MMA never existed, and they didn't exist for a long time.
By the other lady.
You would have
Holly?
never seen that. It would have been a shame for me as a viewer not to have seen that. That was a very exciting time. Now, Ronda, yeah, she's really good at what she does. It's a very interesting topic. I think the conversation of whether male to female has an advantage is mute. I think it's kind of obvious that they do have an advantage at the highest level. At the average, like, you take an average male and he transitions female, he doesn't have an advantage. This is true. You take the average dude with average genetics and they transition female and are really kept back on their testosterone levels. I don't think they can even make it at the hyper level of female competitiveness in a lot of the sports. But the moment you start taking elite level males and transition them, that's where the problem lies. That's where the biggest issue lies.
Okay, I think this is the end of the video. I don't know if there's anything else. It's just, I think it's going to be the same for like another 2 minutes. But I want to add that that's also not true, because a lot of this NCAA swimmer, I think, is the first transgender woman to, like, fucking shit on the competition. I don't know if she shit on them, but is one of the first transgender women to like win that I've seen ever. And I may not know enough, but I know from what I have seen that a majority of transgender women perform worse when they transition. They are not dominating the competition. They're like getting fucking shit on by the competition. They're not performing better than their female counter or their naturally born female counterparts at all. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums up that it's just not exactly a valid opinion to have. And I hope that Grapplr goes by what he said in the beginning of the video, and that he is pleased to hear arguments about why he is wrong, because I do believe that he is wrong. And that is all I have to say.